Value over availability is a principle that reshapes the way you show up in every area of your life. When you begin to understand that your presence carries weight, you stop offering it cheaply. Far too often, people confuse being busy with being valuable, thinking that the more accessible they are, the more appreciated they will become. But true worth is established not by how often you show up, but by how intentionally you show up. The shift happens when you realize that being constantly available drains your potential and disperses your power across places where it has no return. There comes a moment when you recognize that your time is your greatest asset. Every minute spent on something that doesn't contribute to your growth is a minute stolen from your future. When you operate from the mindset of value, you understand that your time is not meant to be given away freely. It is meant to be invested where it multiplies. Availability without purpose leads to exhaustion and resentment, while selective presence leads to clarity and strength. You begin to choose where your energy goes with a sharper awareness. People often take for granted whatever is always within reach. When you overextend yourself, you teach others to undervalue you. You teach them that your boundaries are negotiable, that your needs come second, and that your presence can be requested on demand. But the moment you step back and reclaim your sense of value, you shift the dynamic. You no longer offer your yes out of guilt or obligation. You begin to protect your time the way wealthy people protect their investments, understanding that excess exposure dilutes your worth. Being valuable means becoming intentional about your growth. It means working on yourself even when no one is watching, mastering skills that others overlook, and cultivating habits that build inner strength. This internal work is what elevates your worth. When you become someone who brings excellence, wisdom, and clarity into a room, people begin to respect the rarity of your presence. You don't have to speak loudly about your value. Your results and your discipline do the speaking for you. You start seeing that being everywhere is the enemy of being effective. When you stretch yourself across too many commitments, your focus weakens, your creativity drains, and your energy fragments. Choosing value over availability means choosing depth over surface level activity. It means declining opportunities that distract you from your purpose, even if they look appealing on the surface. It means realizing that your growth requires periods of withdrawal, reflection, and disciplined solitude. As you step into this mindset, you will notice that fewer people have immediate access to you. This is not isolation, it is alignment. You begin to surround yourself with individuals who respect your time and appreciate your boundaries. You let go of those who drain your energy, those who only come around when they need something, and those who benefit from your availability while giving nothing in return. You create room for relationships that elevate you instead of depleting you. Your priorities shift as you focus on becoming the best version of yourself. You invest more deeply in your mental, emotional, and spiritual development. You read, study, and practice with intention. You choose growth experiences over distractions, challenges over comfort, and purpose over popularity. This level of self-investment increases your value far more than trying to be present for everyone ever could. You begin to hold yourself to a higher standard, knowing that value is built privately before it is recognized publicly. Over time, you realize that being valuable creates a natural boundary. People start to approach you with respect instead of expectation. They recognize that your presence is meaningful because it is not constant. Scarcity creates appreciation, and your intentional absence speaks louder than forced presence. Your life becomes quieter but more focused, less chaotic but more productive, and fewer people have access but the right ones stay. Choosing value over availability also teaches you to trust your own worth. You stop seeking validation through constant presence. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself by showing up to every event, responding to every request, or rescuing every person. You trust that your value is rooted in who you are becoming, not how often you appear. You begin to move with quiet confidence, knowing that the right opportunities will recognize your worth without you chasing them. In this evolution, you become someone whose time matters, whose energy is guarded, and whose presence is intentional. You understand that being valuable is not about being exclusive for the sake of ego, but about recognizing that your highest potential requires selective access and strategic focus. You own your time, protect your energy, and build a life that reflects the true weight of your worth. Purpose determines access means that your life is no longer governed by convenience, impulse, or the expectations of others. It becomes guided by a clear sense of direction. When you understand what you're called to do, you stop allowing random people, random conversations, and random distractions to occupy valuable space in your mind. You begin to measure everything by one simple standard. Does this align with my purpose or pull me away from it? That clarity becomes the filter that shapes who gets close to you and who must stay at a distance. As your purpose becomes stronger, your boundaries become clearer. You start realizing that not everyone deserves front row access to your development. Some people only understand the old version of you and cannot comprehend the new path you're creating. Others benefit from your confusion because it keeps you accessible and predictable. Purpose pushes you to step back from environments that keep you stagnant and moves you towards spaces where growth, discipline, and alignment are prioritized. You no longer give your energy to people who have no intentions of evolving. With purpose comes a deeper understanding of how limited your time truly is. You cannot afford to spend hours in conversations that lead nowhere, in relationships that drain you, or in cycles that repeat the same patterns without change. Purpose makes you realize that your time is sacred, and every moment spent off track makes the journey longer. So you become intentional, guarding your time as if your future depends on it, because it does. You allow access only to what strengthens, inspires, and elevates you. Purpose also teaches you to embrace solitude. Not everyone can walk with you, and not everyone should. Some paths are too narrow to bring company. When you accept this, you stop forcing connections, stop chasing validation, and stop apologizing for choosing yourself. The people meant for your journey will align with your purpose, respect your boundaries, and grow alongside you. The rest will naturally fall away as you rise. When purpose determines your access, your relationships evolve. You begin to look for people who challenge you, people who speak courage into your spirit, people who inspire discipline, and people who want to see you win. You recognize that your circle shapes your vision and your environment influences your standard. Purpose draws you toward individuals who bring clarity instead of confusion, wisdom instead of noise, and support instead of sabotage. As you step into alignment, you start noticing how much easier it becomes to identify distractions. They reveal themselves through people who constantly demand your attention without offering respect for your goals. They show up through invitations that look good but pull you off course. They come disguised as opportunities that flatter your ego but derail your mission. Purpose sensitizes you to every subtle attempt to weaken your focus, and you become stronger at saying no without guilt. Purpose-driven access also transforms the way you communicate. You stop explaining your decisions to people who have no understanding of your vision. You stop seeking approval from those who lack ambition. You stop lowering your standard to make others comfortable. Instead, you communicate with clarity and confidence, guided by the understanding that your life's direction does not require unanimous agreement. Your purpose becomes your permission. As you grow deeper into your purpose, you become more selective with what you consume. You choose information that builds you rather than distracts you. You choose habits that elevate you rather than weaken you. You choose routines that align with discipline rather than chaos. Everything begins to support your identity instead of contradicting it. Access becomes a privilege, not a default setting. You also start to notice how aligned access creates momentum. The more you protect your time, the more progress you make, the more intentional you become, the more clarity you gain, the more you limit distractions, the more your purpose sharpens. Purpose turns your choices into stepping stones, each one leading you closer to who you're becoming. Every decision begins to carry weight because every decision becomes part of your direction. When purpose determines access, your entire life reorganizes itself. You speak differently, you choose differently, you think differently, and you move differently. You no longer live in reaction to the world, you live in alignment with your mission. You become someone who rises with intention, walks with direction, and protects the path that leads to the highest version of yourself. Intentional growth creates separation because the moment you decide to elevate, you stop moving at the pace of people who are comfortable staying the same. Growth demands new habits, new standards, and new environments, and not everyone around you is willing to make that shift. When you start growing on purpose instead of by accident, The gap between who you were and who you're becoming widens. That gap naturally creates distance from people who have no desire to evolve with you, and instead of resisting that distance, you learn to respect it. As your mindset expands, conversations that once entertained, you begin to feel shallow. You lose interest in gossip, distractions, and negativity because your focus moves toward discipline, clarity, and purpose. While others may still feel satisfied repeating the same cycles, you start craving environments that challenge you intellectually and spiritually. This shift pulls you out of circles that drain you and pushes you into ones that sharpen you. The separation isn't personal, it's a reflection of the direction you're choosing. When you commit to intentional growth, your habits change. You start waking up earlier, thinking deeper, planning better, and living with more awareness. Those who preferred the old version of you may feel uncomfortable or even offended by the changes. They may accuse you of acting different when in reality, you're simply becoming aligned with your potential. Growth requires routines that others may not understand. And that misunderstanding becomes another layer of separation that you learn to navigate with strength. Your priorities shift as you evolve. Things that once seemed important become distractions. People who once had constant access to you begin to feel that access shrink. You stop entertaining chaos. You stop participating in conversations that drain your energy. You stop allowing your emotions to be managed by other people's expectations. This refinement of priorities becomes a filter that keeps your life focused, and anyone who doesn't respect your new priorities naturally drifts away. Intentional growth also exposes relationships built on convenience instead of genuine connection. When you start changing, you begin to see who supported you only when you were predictable and who supports you when you aim higher. Some people were comfortable with your old limitations because it made them feel secure. When you break out of those limitations, they feel threatened or left behind. The separation that follows reveals the authenticity of the people around you. As you grow on purpose, you adopt a new sense of responsibility for your life. You no longer blame circumstances, environments, or other people for what you lack. You take ownership of your choices, actions, and direction. That mindset creates separation from those who remain in a cycle of excuses. People who refuse accountability cannot walk closely with someone who embraces responsibility. The contrast becomes too sharp for both sides to ignore. Growth also changes the way you view your time. You no longer waste hours on pursuits that lead nowhere. You become more intentional about how you spend your days, who you spend them with, and what you give your attention to. This time awareness creates separation from people who drift through life aimlessly. Your progress becomes uncomfortable for those who are content with stagnation, and your seriousness becomes a mirror they don't want to look into. Intentional growth sharpens your identity. You gain clarity about who you are, what you want, and what you will no longer tolerate. The stronger your identity becomes, the weaker your tolerance for inconsistency, manipulation, or emotional chaos. As you strengthen your sense of self, you stop accepting relationships that weaken it. This creates separation not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect and alignment. Your vision also expands as you grow. You start seeing possibilities that once felt unrealistic. You begin dreaming bigger, planning smarter, and believing in yourself with more conviction. People with small visions may feel intimidated or confused by your new sense of purpose. They may try to pull you back into familiar patterns because your growth challenges their comfort. The separation that appears is a result of vision mismatch, not conflict. Over time, intentional growth builds a new version of you that cannot fit into old spaces. You outgrow environments that once felt normal, habits that once felt necessary, and relationships that once felt permanent. Separation becomes a natural part of your evolution. It's not something you chase or force, it simply happens as you rise. This distance is evidence that you are moving forward with intention, embracing who you are becoming, and honoring the path that leads you toward your highest potential. Intentional growth creates separation. Because the moment you start choosing evolution over comfort, your life naturally divides into what pushes you forward and what holds you back. Growth requires intention, and intention requires clarity. When you decide to elevate yourself, you begin to move differently, think differently, and choose differently. This shift causes distance between you and anything that no longer aligns with who you are becoming. That separation isn't punishment. It's progress revealing itself in real time. You start to notice that the habits, conversations, and environments that once felt normal now feel restricting, and the version of you who accepted mediocrity begins to fade. As you grow intentionally, people who benefited from your old patterns may not understand your new priorities. Some may feel threatened by your discipline, others may feel abandoned by your ambition, and many will not know how to handle the boundaries you begin to set. Growth exposes who was connected to your destiny and who was attached to your comfort. It becomes clear who respects your evolution and who preferred you stagnant. The distance that forms is not personal, it is purposeful. Your life begins to filter itself as your standards rise. This separation also happens within yourself. You start peeling away beliefs that kept you small, doubts that kept you hesitant, and fears that kept you silent. You begin to separate from the version of you that settled, tolerated, and delayed your potential. You detach from excuses, adopt discipline, and accept accountability. Intentional growth forces you to confront the stories you once lived by and replace them with principles that strengthen you. The inner separation is often the hardest part, but it is also the most necessary. As you become more intentional, your focus becomes sharper. Things that once distracted you now feel irrelevant. You become more aware of how valuable your energy is and how expensive it is to waste it. You begin to separate from noise, from chaos, from people who drain you, and from habits that sabotage you. You create space for clarity, peace, and direction. This separation is not about isolation. It is about alignment. You begin to move with purpose instead of impulse. Intentional growth reveals that not everyone is meant to grow with you. Some people only understand the version of you who played small. They don't recognize the discipline you're building or the vision you're pursuing. As you rise, you'll feel the emotional distance from those who refuse to elevate themselves. You can't force someone to grow, and you can't shrink yourself to stay connected. Growth demands detachment from anything or anyone that refuses to evolve. The more intentional you become, the more you attract environments that support your development. You start finding people who speak your language of purpose, who challenge you, who inspire you, and who hold you accountable. This new circle creates another layer of separation as you begin to gravitate toward people who match your hunger for growth. The deeper your growth becomes, the more aligned your relationships become. You naturally rise into rooms that once intimidated you and leave behind ones that no longer fit your direction. With intentional growth, your priorities shift. What mattered before now feels minor. What you used to chase now seems meaningless. What you once ignored now carries weight. You begin to prioritize discipline, learning, and progress over entertainment, distraction, and validation. You separate from instant gratification because long-term transformation becomes more rewarding. This shift creates a gap between your present identity and your future potential. And the journey is about bridging that gap through consistent effort. Separation also shows up in your mindset. You begin to think bigger, plan deeper, and act stronger. You no longer operate from survival, you operate from intention. You stop making decisions based on emotion and start making them based on alignment. You separate from old thought patterns and adopt beliefs that make room for expansion. This mental separation is what leads to new behaviors, new habits, and new results. As you continue growing, you will notice a different kind of separation, the separation between what you want and what you need to become. Growth highlights the distance between desire and discipline, between goals and sacrifice, between dreams and effort. You learn that the separation is bridged not by wishing, but by working, not by talking, but by acting. Intentional growth is the process of constantly choosing your future over your comfort. Ultimately, intentional growth creates separation because evolution cannot coexist with stagnation. When you choose to rise, you cannot stay where you were. You cannot carry everyone, everything, or every habit into your next level. You must let go of what weighs you down to make room for what lifts you up. The separation isn't a loss. It's the price of becoming the person you were meant to be. Discipline is the new currency of 2025. Because in a world full of distractions, scrolling, noise, and shortcuts, the ability to control yourself becomes more valuable than anything you own. Discipline gives you something that motivation never can: consistency. And consistency is what separates dreamers from achievers. The people who win in 2025 will not be the most talented or the most connected. They will be the ones who can say no to comfort, no to distraction, and yes to the work that their future demands from them. When you treat discipline like currency, you begin to spend your energy wisely. You invest your time into habits that pay you back, not ones that drain you. You start valuing structure over impulse and long-term results over temporary pleasure. Discipline becomes the measure of wealth because every action guided by discipline moves you closer to your purpose, while every action guided by impulse pulls you further from it. The more disciplined you are, the more powerful your life becomes. Discipline gives you control over your destiny. Instead of waking up reacting to the world, you wake up building it. You don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect day, or the perfect circumstances. You decide that every day is an opportunity to shape the life you want. By choosing discipline over excuses, you take ownership of your progress. You stop blaming circumstances and start directing your energy towards solutions. This shift transforms your future because discipline produces results even when motivation disappears. As discipline becomes your currency, you begin to see how many doors it opens. It builds habits that strengthen you, routines that keep you focused, and systems that make success inevitable. Discipline helps you improve your craft, sharpen your skills, and elevate your standards. Opportunities begin to recognize you because you're no longer inconsistent or unpredictable. You show up with reliability, resilience, and readiness. People trust you, success gravitates toward you, and confidence grows inside you. The reason discipline is so powerful in 2025 is because most people won't have it. The world is becoming more comfortable, more distracted, and more impatient. People want quick results with minimal effort. They want recognition without sacrifice. They want transformation without discipline. This creates a massive advantage for the person who chooses consistency. When everyone else is distracted, your focus becomes a superpower. When everyone else stops, your discipline keeps you moving. Discipline also strengthens your identity. Every time you honor your commitments, you send a message to yourself: I can trust me. That self-trust becomes confidence. That confidence becomes momentum. That momentum becomes transformation. Discipline shapes who you become because it teaches your mind to obey your purpose rather than your emotions. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop delaying your growth. You stop breaking the promises you make to your future. In 2025, discipline becomes your shield against distraction. You start recognizing how much time you've wasted on things that don't matter. You become aware of how easily your attention has been pulled into things that offer nothing in return. Discipline helps you reclaim your time and refocus your energy on what truly matters. You begin choosing productivity over procrastination, purpose over entertainment, and alignment over chaos. As discipline grows, your entire lifestyle changes. You begin waking up earlier, planning better, thinking deeper, and working smarter. You start to enjoy the process because discipline teaches you to appreciate progress, not perfection. You begin to fall in love with consistency, knowing that every small action compounds over time. The more disciplined you become, the more unrecognizable your old self feels because discipline builds a version of you that your past self could only imagine. Discipline is also the currency that pays for your dreams. Everything you want, health, wealth, relationships, confidence, success, has a price. That price is discipline. You cannot buy success with excuses. You cannot buy growth with laziness. You cannot buy transformation with inconsistency. You pay for greatness through daily choices, daily sacrifice, and daily dedication. Discipline becomes the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. In 2025, discipline will separate those who repeat the same year over and over from those who create a life they are proud of. It will determine who rises and who remains the same, who evolves and who stays stuck, who builds a legacy and who wastes their potential. Discipline is the new currency because everything you desire depends on your ability to stay committed when it's hard, focused when it's noisy, and consistent when it's uncomfortable. Intentional growth creates separation. Because the more focused you become on evolving, the less compatible you become with environments that thrive on comfort and complacency. When you begin to choose growth with purpose, you naturally drift away from people who are satisfied with staying the same. This separation is not born out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You start realizing that the conversations you once entertained no longer feed your spirit, and the routines you once followed no longer match the vision you carry within. Growth requires elevation, and elevation requires leaving behind whatever keeps you grounded in old patterns. As you commit to intentional growth, your priorities shift. You begin valuing silence over noise, discipline over distraction, and progress over approval. This shift creates a distance between you and those who still live for instant gratification or external validation. The separation is not always comfortable, but it is necessary. You start stepping into habits that strengthen your future, and those habits often require you to walk alone for a season. Your willingness to embrace that solitude becomes one of your greatest strengths. People who once understood you may no longer recognize you as you evolve. They may question your decisions, misunderstand your boundaries, or interpret your distance as disinterest. But the truth is that growth demands a new version of you, and not everyone is meant to meet that version. Some people are attached to your history, not your destiny. As you rise, you begin to notice who grows with you and who tries to pull you back into familiar but limiting spaces. Intentional growth reveals what no longer belongs in your life. You start seeing clearly who drains your energy, who distracts your mind, and who disrupts your peace. The more intentional you become, the easier it is to recognize relationships that once felt normal but are now misaligned. Separate, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Growth will always cost you something, and sometimes that cost is the comfort of old connections. As you level up internally, your external world must adjust. You can't expect transformation while surrounding yourself with people who don't aspire to anything. Growth pushes you to seek environments where discipline is normal, excellence is expected, and expansion is the standard. The separation becomes a natural byproduct of choosing higher standards for your life. And while it may feel lonely at times, it is also liberating because it creates room for the right connections to enter. Your habits begin to separate you as well. When you start waking up earlier, investing in your mind, and focusing on your goals, you automatically drift away from those who waste their time. When you prioritize purpose over entertainment, you stand out, not because you think you were better, but because you're committed to becoming better than you were yesterday. Growth becomes your identity, not just your intention. As the separation grows, so does your clarity. You begin understanding that everyone has a path, but not everyone's path is meant to intertwine with yours. Some people were part of your journey only to show you what not to become. Others were meant to push you forward, but not to walk with you forever. Growth requires discernment, and discernment creates distance from anything misaligned with your purpose. You also learn that separation is a sign of maturation. Most people avoid it because they fear judgment, loneliness, or change, but intentional growth demands courage. It forces you to break patterns, question beliefs, and create a new identity. That identity cannot fit into old environments, and that is where separation becomes inevitable. You stop shrinking yourself to remain relatable and start expanding yourself to remain purposeful. As time passes, you begin to appreciate the separation. You realize it was not about losing people. It was about discovering yourself. You see that letting go was an act of love toward your future, not rejection of your past. The distance created by growth becomes a space where your potential finally breathes, develops, and matures into something powerful. Separation becomes a sign that you are moving toward your destiny. In the end, intentional growth reshapes your life, your relationships, your habits, and your identity. You evolve into someone who no longer fits the limitations you once accepted. The separation is simply the evidence that you are rising, expanding, and stepping into a version of yourself that only discipline, clarity, and purpose can create. Discipline is the new currency of 2025 because in a world full of distractions, the rarest skill is the ability to stay focused. The world offers endless opportunities to waste time, energy, and purpose. Entertainment is endless, comfort is tempting, and shortcuts are more available than ever. Yet the people who will win this year are the ones who can consistently do what needs to be done, even when they don't feel like doing it. Discipline becomes more valuable than talent, motivation, or opportunity because it guarantees results when everything else fades. In 2025, discipline is what will separate dreamers from achievers. Motivation can spark a desire, but discipline builds reality. It is the force that pushes you through days when you don't feel inspired, when progress feels slow, and when challenges make quitting seem easier. Those who master discipline no longer rely on emotional waves to carry them forward. They operate from commitment, not convenience, and commitment is what produces lasting transformation. Discipline becomes your leverage. It turns small actions into massive results. It transforms ordinary days into powerful momentum. Every time you choose consistency over comfort, you invest in a future that builds itself brick by brick. This currency cannot be borrowed, faked, or replaced. It must be earned through daily decisions, repeated sacrifices, and a relentless dedication to your purpose. The more disciplined you become, the more powerful you become. In a noisy world, discipline simplifies things. It cuts out distractions and reveals what truly matters. You stop chasing everything and start focusing on the few things that move your life forward. You learn to say no to instant gratification and yes to long-term growth. This clarity becomes your competitive advantage because most people are too scattered to make meaningful progress. Discipline sharpens your vision and aligns your actions with your goals. People will begin to notice your transformation, not because you announce it, but because your results become impossible to ignore. Discipline changes how you speak, how you move, how you think, and how you show up. You begin walking with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are building something real. You stop making excuses and start making progress. You stop hoping for change and start creating it with your own hands. As discipline grows, your identity changes. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who honors commitments, someone who doesn't give up at the first sign of difficulty. That identity shift becomes the foundation of your strength. The more you practice discipline, the more it becomes natural, and the more natural it becomes, the easier growth feels. You start trusting yourself on a deeper level because you know you can depend on your actions. Discipline also protects your future. It keeps you from wasting opportunities, relationships, and moments that could change everything. It teaches you patience, resilience, and self-control. In a world where people look for immediate results, discipline teaches you to build foundations strong enough to last. Those who rely on shortcuts may rise quickly, but they fall just as fast. Discipline creates sustainability, endurance, and longevity. In 2025, discipline is a currency that multiplies. Every disciplined day compounds into greater clarity, greater confidence, and greater capacity. The more disciplined you become, the more you can handle. The more you can handle, the more you can achieve. It becomes a cycle of unstoppable growth, rooted not in intensity, but in consistency. Even on your worst days, discipline keeps you moving forward. Discipline also sets you apart in ways that are undeniable. People around you may talk about what they want, but you act on it. They may make excuses, but you make adjustments. They may procrastinate, but you execute. Your discipline becomes a silent force that elevates you above the average, the inconsistent, and the uncommitted. It becomes the foundation of the life you are building. This year, discipline is the currency that will open doors, create opportunities, elevate your mind, and reshape your entire life. It becomes the tool that transforms potential into progress and desire into destiny. It is the most valuable skill you can possess because it ensures that no matter what challenges arise, you will always be capable of rising above them. Boundaries are a form of self-respect because they define how much you value your time, your energy, and your peace. When you allow people to cross lines without consequences, you send a message that your needs are negotiable. But the moment you establish boundaries, you declare that your well-being matters. You show yourself that you deserve protection, clarity, and space to grow. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors that determine who earns the right to come in. As you begin to set boundaries, you notice how much of your life was shaped by the expectations of others. You may realize how often you said yes out of guilt, stayed silent out of fear, or allowed disrespect because you didn't want to create conflict. But boundaries free you from those patterns. They give you the courage to to prioritize your own emotional and mental health. They help you reclaim your life from obligations that do not serve your purpose. Boundaries teach people how to treat you. They communicate where you stand and what you tolerate. Without them, others may assume they can take more than you can give, interrupt your peace without hesitation, or drain your energy without remorse. But when you create structure around your time and space, people either adjust or distance themselves. Both outcomes benefit you because they reveal who respects you and who only respects their own convenience. As you strengthen your boundaries, you begin to understand your worth more clearly. You stop accepting relationships that treat your loyalty as a resource to be exploited. You stop engaging in conversations that diminish your confidence. You stop allowing situations that make you compromise your values. Boundaries serve as a mirror that reflects your self-esteem. The more you honor them, the more you honor yourself. Setting boundaries often brings temporary discomfort, but it creates long-term peace. Some people may react negatively because they were accustomed to having unlimited access to you. They may accuse you of changing or becoming distant, but that discomfort is the price of growth. Boundaries reveal the true nature of relationships. Those who value you will adapt. Those who only valued your availability will fall away. Boundaries also protect your energy. You begin noticing how certain people drain you while others inspire you. You learn to step away from emotional chaos, unnecessary drama, and situations that constantly demand more than they give. Protecting your energy becomes an act of maturity because it allows you to function at your highest potential. Without boundaries, your energy scatters. With boundaries, your energy strengthens. As your self-respect grows, you stop explaining your boundaries to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. You realize you do not need permission to protect your peace. You do not need approval to preserve your mental health. You do not need validation for choosing yourself. Boundaries are your responsibility, not anyone else's, and enforcing them becomes a form of personal power. You begin to experience how boundaries enhance your relationships. Healthy people appreciate clarity. Emotionally mature people value honesty. Real friends respect your limits. Boundaries create space for mutual respect, stronger communication, and more meaningful connections. They remove confusion and replace it with alignment. They eliminate resentment and replace it with balance. Boundaries also create structure in your life. You start managing your time with intention. You prioritize what matters and release what distracts you. You give yourself permission to rest, to say no, and to step away when necessary. This structure becomes the foundation of your stability and the anchor that keeps you grounded while pursuing your purpose. In the end, boundaries become a reflection of the way you see yourself. They signal that your peace is valuable, your time is important, and your purpose deserves protection. You no longer shrink to fit other people's expectations. You rise into a version of yourself who understands that self-respect is not spoken. It is enforced through action, clarity, and unwavering standards. Intentional growth creates separation because the moment you decide to rise, you automatically distance yourself from anything that keeps you stagnant. Growth is not passive. It requires deliberate choices, structured habits, and a mindset that resists comfort. When you begin to work on yourself with intention, you start noticing how differently you think, how differently you respond, and how differently you choose your priorities. This difference is what naturally creates space between you and the environments that no longer serve the person you're becoming. The deeper you commit to growth, the more you become aware of the subtle habits that once held you back. You see how old routines consumed your time, how certain conversations drained your energy, and how your inconsistency delayed your progress. When you step into intentional growth, you no longer tolerate cycles that repeat without improvement. You become willing to let go of patterns you once normalized because your future demands a higher standard. As you elevate, you begin to see that not everyone is interested in growing with you. Some people are attached to the version of you that was convenient for them. But intentional growth shifts your identity, and people who relied on your limitations may feel uncomfortable with your elevation. You stop trying to fit into places where growth isn't valued, and you stop apologizing for choosing a path that others aren't ready for. Intentional growth teaches you that separation is not rejection, it is alignment. It is the natural byproduct of becoming more disciplined, more focused, and more purpose-driven. The relationships that were rooted in complacency begin to fade, not because of conflict, but because your priorities evolve. You start valuing depth over distraction, purpose over pleasure, and progress over popularity. As you grow intentionally, you step into environments that challenge you. You begin to seek conversations that stretch your thinking instead of weakening your discipline. You gravitate toward people who push you toward excellence rather than comfort. This shift creates a new circle, one that aligns with your vision instead of your past. And the more aligned your circle becomes, the faster you grow. Growth also demands solitude. There are seasons where you must walk alone to sharpen your identity, develop your skills, and strengthen your mindset. These seasons can feel isolating, but they are necessary. The separation that comes from intentional growth isn't a punishment, it's preparation. It molds you into someone capable of handling the responsibilities tied to your future. Eventually, intentional growth shifts your internal standards. You no longer tolerate excuses from yourself. You stop negotiating with your potential. You hold yourself accountable in ways you never have before. This internal shift is what creates the most distance between the old you and the evolving you. And that separation becomes the foundation of your transformation. You start embracing environments where excellence is normal and mediocrity is questioned. You surround yourself with people who talk about goals, discipline, and vision. You stop investing in relationships that only exist to revisit the past. This is the separation that allows you to rise without being pulled backward by outdated expectations. Every day of intentional growth increases the gap between who you were and who you're becoming. As that gap widens, your clarity sharpens. You see your path more clearly and you walk it with greater conviction. You begin to understand that separation is not something to fear, but something to honor. With each intentional step, you align more deeply with your purpose, and the distance between you and unnecessary distractions grows effortlessly. You rise because you choose to rise, and in that choice, separation becomes the silent partner of your elevation. Discipline is the new currency of 2025 because effort alone is no longer enough in a world filled with noise, shortcuts, and distractions. The people who succeed this year will not be the ones who simply want success, but the ones who are disciplined enough to act consistently regardless of circumstances. Discipline is no longer optional. It is the foundation upon which every breakthrough will be built. It determines who thrives, who stagnates, and who falls behind. When discipline becomes your priority, you stop waiting for motivation to carry you. Motivation may start the journey, but discipline finishes it. Motivation is inconsistent, emotional, and temporary, while discipline is structured, reliable, and sustainable. The individuals who thrive in 2025 understand that greatness doesn't happen when it feels good, it happens when it feels necessary. Discipline is the force that makes your future non-negotiable. Discipline reshapes your daily structure. It demands that you commit to habits that elevate you rather than habits that entertain you. It forces you to choose long-term reward over short-term pleasure. It strengthens your ability to delay gratification, which is a skill few people possess in a society built on instant satisfaction. The disciplined person becomes powerful because they operate on principles, not impulses. As you develop discipline, your standards rise. You no longer tolerate inconsistency from yourself. You begin to recognize how much time you once wasted on distractions, procrastination, and empty routines. Discipline replaces chaos with clarity and replaces excuses with results. You begin controlling your time instead of allowing your time to control you. And this shift turns you into a completely different version of yourself. Discipline also becomes the currency that determines opportunity. People respect consistency. Doors open for individuals who show reliability, not just enthusiasm. In 2025, the world is shifting toward individuals who execute, not just talk. Your ability to follow through becomes more valuable than your talent because discipline multiplies talent while lack of discipline suffocates it. The more disciplined you become, the more control you gain over your life. You stop reacting to circumstances and start directing them. You stop living by emotion and start living by intention. Discipline gives you the power to say no to the things that don't serve you and yes to the things that shape your future. It creates a sense of inner authority that makes you unstoppable. Discipline also transforms your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who can be trusted with responsibilities, commitments, and goals. Each disciplined action reinforces your self-belief. Every day you choose discipline, you cast a vote for the person you want to become. This consistent voting process slowly shifts your identity from uncertain to unstoppable. You also realize that discipline separates you from the masses. Most people settle for good enough, but disciplined individuals reach for excellence. Most people fold when it gets difficult, but disciplined individuals rise when pressure increases. Most people are driven by comfort, but disciplined individuals are driven by purpose. This separation is not born from arrogance. It's born from commitment. As discipline becomes your standard, you begin to attract opportunities that match your effort. People start to notice your consistency. They recognize the quality of your work. They trust your reliability. This is how discipline becomes currency. It increases your value in every environment you step into. It shapes how you're perceived, how you're requested, and how you're rewarded. Ultimately, discipline gives you something most people never experience: mastery. Mastery over your habits, mastery over your time, mastery over your mindset, and mastery over your future. In 2025, this mastery is the greatest currency you can possess, and it becomes the gateway to everything you've been striving for. Boundaries are a form of self-respect because they reflect how you choose to be treated, how you choose to be valued, and how you choose to protect your peace. Without boundaries, you leave your worth open to interpretation, allowing others to define your limits, your priorities, and your emotional capacity. But when you establish clear boundaries, you declare that your life, your time, and your energy are not accessible to everyone without consideration. The moment you begin setting boundaries, you shift the way you show up in relationships. You stop overextending yourself to meet expectations that aren't aligned with your well-being. You stop allowing guilt to dictate your decisions. You stop sacrificing your mental and emotional health for temporary approval. Boundaries teach you to respect yourself enough to say no when necessary and yes when aligned. Boundaries also create emotional safety. They prevent others from crossing lines that lead to resentment, frustration, and burnout. When you fail to set boundaries, you often end up feeling unseen or taken advantage of, not because people are intentionally harmful, but because you never communicated your limits. Boundaries remove assumptions and replace them with clarity, which strengthens relationships rather than weakens them. As you strengthen your boundaries, you begin noticing who truly respects you. People who value your presence will honor your limits. People who only value your availability will resist them. This resistance reveals everything you need to know about their intentions. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters that separate what serves you from what drains you. Setting boundaries requires confidence, but more importantly, it builds confidence. Every time you enforce a boundary, you reinforce your self-worth. You teach yourself that your needs matter, your time matters, and your peace matters. You stop shrinking to accommodate others and start standing tall in your identity. This shift impacts every area of your life, from relationships to career to personal growth. Boundaries also protect your energy. You cannot pour into your goals, dreams, or purpose when you are drained by obligations that offer no return. When you guard your energy, you perform better, think clearer, and grow faster. You stop scattering your strength in too many directions and begin channeling it toward what truly matters. This is how boundaries create momentum. With boundaries, you start choosing environments where respect is mutual. You stop seeking validation from places that only offered pressure. You stop chasing approval from people who never valued your contribution. Boundaries push you toward relationships built on reciprocity, support, and emotional balance. These environments help you flourish rather than fragment. Boundaries also show you the importance of honoring other people's limits. When you understand the value of your own space, you learn to respect the space of others. This mutual understanding creates healthier connections, deeper trust, and stronger communication. You begin engaging with people not from a place of neediness, but from a place of empowerment. As your boundaries become stronger, you become more intentional about your commitments. You no longer say yes out of fear, obligation, or habit. You say yes out of purpose, alignment, and clarity. This intentionality brings peace into your life because your decisions are rooted in your truth rather than external pressure. With boundaries as your foundation, you create a life grounded in respect, clarity, and emotional strength. You choose yourself without apology, protect your peace without hesitation, and move forward without compromising the values that define your worth. Elevation requires selectivity because rising to a higher level demands that you intentionally choose what supports your growth and release what restricts it. Every step of elevation requires you to lighten your load, sharpen your focus, and refine your environment. You cannot rise while carrying unnecessary weight, unnecessary relationships, and unnecessary distractions. Selectivity becomes the tool that allows you to move upward with clarity and purpose. When you decide to elevate, you begin noticing how much your surroundings influence your mindset. Not everyone around you is aligned with your growth. Some people keep you comfortable instead of accountable. Some environments encourage stagnation rather than transformation. Selectivity requires you to evaluate every connection and determine whether it moves you forward or holds you back. Selectivity also applies to your habits. The person you want to become cannot be built with the habits of the person you used to be. Elevation demands that you choose discipline over impulse, purpose over pleasure, and consistency over convenience. Each habit you eliminate or replace becomes part of the foundation that supports your next level. As you elevate, your time becomes more valuable. You begin to see that not every invitation deserves your attention, not every conversation deserves your response, and not every opportunity deserves your participation. Selectivity teaches you to guard your time as an asset rather than treating it as something disposable. You move from living reactively to living intentionally. Elevation also requires selectivity of focus. You cannot chase every idea or pursue every path. Elevation demands concentration. It demands that you commit fully to what aligns with your purpose and let go of what distracts you. You begin to understand that mastery is built through narrowing your focus, not broadening it. As you rise, some relationships naturally fall away. This is not because you think you're better than others, but because your values evolve. Some connections were tied to your old mindset, old habits, and old identity. When you grow beyond those patterns, the relationships attached to them lose their relevance. Selectivity protects your alignment by ensuring that your circle reflects your direction. Elevation requires selectivity in what you consume mentally and emotionally. You start choosing books, content, and conversations that build you rather than weaken you. You stop feeding your mind with negativity or trivial distractions. You treat your mental space with the same respect you give to your goals. Selectivity becomes the gatekeeper of your peace and productivity. With selectivity comes clarity. You begin recognizing what truly matters and what only appears to matter. You stop pursuing validation from everyone and start seeking alignment with your purpose. You stop trying to be everything to everyone and focus on becoming the best version of yourself. This clarity accelerates your growth and sharpens your identity. Selectivity also teaches you the power of intentional relationships. You begin to value connections built on support, ambition, honesty, and mutual growth. You seek people who challenge your thinking, inspire your discipline, and celebrate your progress. These relationships fuel your elevation and protect you from slipping back into old patterns. Elevation is not accidental, it is chosen. And the deeper you rise, the more selective you must become. Every decision, every relationship, every habit, and every focus point becomes part of the structure that determines how far you go. Selectivity becomes the silent architect of your success, shaping the life you are building step by step.